an opportunity to book the podcasting recording time. And I started with that very basic. And one of the things that I have really grown into is making sure that the templates of the reminders have the proper information they need.
Most hosts never achieve the results they hoped for. They're falling short on listenership and monetization, meaning their message isn't being heard and their show ends up costing them money. This podcast was created to help you grow your listenership and make money while you're at it. Get ready to take notes. Here's your host, Adam Adams.
What's up, podcaster? It's Adam A. Adams, and today I am joined with Lisa Zawrotny. And Lisa, how did I do? Did I say it right that time?
Nailed it, Adam. Well done.
So there's this silent W. You'll see that in the show notes. Scroll down. What we're talking about today is what she's learned over the last 3+ years, consistently putting out episodes every single week, what she would do differently, what she's learned. And I'm going to talk a little bit about her business just because it seems interesting for someone like you and me, who is an entrepreneur, a podcaster, to be able to work less and make more and spend less time, but have those efforts being effective. So we'll find out about her superpower, her genius zone, about what we can be doing. So Lisa, thank you for jumping on. A mutual friend, Lubna, connected us. I got to a point, so you know, and so that my listener knows too, got to a point where I thought that I had episodes for days. I thought I had 4 months worth of episodes in the can, or I call it a bank account. And then there was a day came where I was twiddling my thumbs probably, and my teammate said that I was behind on episodes. So I reached out to a couple of people that I really trust, Lubna, Alex, and a couple others. And I said, can you put me in touch with your top guests that you've had on your show? People that you think will really shine and help my listener. So that's how I met Lisa. And let's dive in. I want to ask the first question comes from her bio, where it talks a little bit about, I think it said hypnotism or something like that. And so I'm just going to pretend that it said hypnotism. And I'm going to ask her, do you hypnotize people?
I do not, but I certainly help them reframe their lives and what it means to be productive, because we have a society that's telling us something completely off base for our benefit.
Okay. So how do you do that? Like, take me as an example, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. I'll get some free coaching because you do this for a living, I know. What would you do to work with a client that is a podcaster who has a business and they want to be able to kind of get out of their own way? How do you do that, I guess, without hypnotism?
I love this question. Let me start first by telling you a little bit about why I got into podcasting, which leads right into this, which is when you are running a business, right? And in this case, this goes back to the reason why you have a podcast in the first place. And whether you are starting it, you're brand new, even if you've been doing it for a while, being very clear on why you're doing this podcast and who you're talking to is so, so important. So I knew that I wanted to talk to my people, and my word of the year was reach. And I thought a podcast could be a great way to do this. But you know what I did first? I started a blog. Why? Because people told me to. Because the groups that I was in, the entrepreneurs that I know said, hey, you need anchor content. You're a good writer. Start a blog. And I did. And we are going to pretend that this is my blog and listen to the sound. This is me blowing dust like an inch thick off of the blog that I wouldn't keep up with. Why? Because that's not where I shine. That's not what I love to do. I love these conversations. This lights me up more than anything else. So when I realized, oh, wait a minute, I can still achieve the same results, get that anchor content out there, showcase my expertise, but do it when I'm having a conversation like this, sign me up. And that's why I started it. So yeah, the first thing we do is create a self-awareness. How do you work best? What is it about you? So I am curious. Have you done assessments before, Adam, like in terms of understanding who you are? It could be the DISC assessment, or it could be introversion and extroversion. The Big Five is one of my favorites. Have you done any of those and discovered anything about yourself?
Yeah, a little. There's this thing called Predictive Index, the PI, and I am a maverick. And I could tell you where my A, B, C, and D are. And they've also got the I think it's an E on another place. So I could share with you where all of those line up if you're curious.
I think I'm more curious about when you found out these letters of the alphabet, right? Because for those who don't know PI, I know actually coach people who work with PI, and I appreciate that as one of the types of assessments. But when you did this, were you able to connect the dots in terms of like, oh, because I'm a maverick, because I have these tendencies, this is why certain approaches work for me and other ones I tried and it just fell flat. Were you able to make those connections at all? Or can you think of some examples?
Yeah, there's a few. So mavericks, it doesn't mean we're a better CEO than like a different person. We are one of the most common CEOs.
Right.
Most common because we aren't so afraid of making a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of other people are afraid of making a mistake. And you kind of got to put yourself out there, sometimes to launch a podcast or sometimes to launch a company. You got to really put yourself out there. But with Mavericks, the way that we are is we like to start lots of things. We are the idea people. We like to start a whole bunch of stuff, but we don't want to follow it through. We don't want to see it through. I don't want to see it through. And for a long time, I wondered if something was wrong with me because some people could follow through and I got bored real easy. So yeah, in learning about the Maverick and who they are, it helped me to be able to put other people in the team that could follow through with things. Since I knew that I was naturally not doing it and the PI said that I would be bad at it, at keeping with something, I decided that I needed to find somebody with kind of like my yin and yang. I needed to find my opposite to support me in business. And so I found people that had a higher attention to detail than I do, people that were more, what's the word for it, patient than I am. They don't need it all to be done yesterday. They're okay to do the same thing every day. And they can kind of fulfill in the gaps of what I was missing on my own.
Yeah, like with the Ocean assessment, OCEAN, I love that because it's on a sliding scale. So it's your percentage of extroversion, your openness, your conscientiousness, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And don't be afraid by that word. It just means, your tendency toward anxiety and how you react to stress. And so someone who is high percentage of conscientiousness, or if you're doing the DISC profile, those who are steadfast and conscientious, those are the I dotters and T crossers. Those are definitely your balance. So yeah, finding where your balance is, also coming to accept. And what you said right in the very beginning, which is, this is not better or worse. It's just, this is who I am. And this is my propensity toward this. And then here's where I need the balance. And then in terms of coaching, I would also work with you for your own personal habits, because we talk a lot about work-life balance and I'm like, it's all connected. And especially if you are an entrepreneur who's a solo or small team, right? You're just starting out, you're trying to put this all together. So you're doing your thing. This includes a podcast and it's like all the stuff. Well, your life is your life and all those connections, the habits you create. I don't quite like to go to that extreme of how you do one thing is how you do everything, but how you tend to each thing in your life and how you make sure that you honor each aspect of you, right? That's going to change how you show up, getting you in a flow state based on what you love to do. Maybe your habits need to connect more to that, like loving that variety. You probably love things. You get lots of dopamine hits, right? Where there's newness and there's interest. We may need to change your environment when you have to do something that's similar each time in order to give you the novelty you need. So those are the ways that we would work together.
Awesome. And I've got some other questions. So many, actually. But
Ask
this
away.
is going more specific to your journey of being involved in podcasting regularly for more than 3 years. Mm-hmm. And it's a series of about 5 or 6 questions. They're quick ones. Don't worry. The first one is, with 3 years of podcasting, have you ever changed your title of your podcast or your artwork in 3 years?
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. And I would consider what I've done to be kind of soft rebranding, if you will. And working with my podcast producer over time, it actually calls to mind, there's an episode that you just did. I am forgetting the guest's name, but she was talking about how you title your podcast and how people are going to find you, right? So it's like, when you want to be clear about that, Positively Living was connected to my Positively Productive title. And it was that overarching, like what I talked about, it's in our entire life, right? And what we want to do. And the positively speaks to the positive psychology aspect of it, of the strengths-based or strengths-led, that's easy for me to say, kind of approach. But that doesn't necessarily, I mean, it means something positive to people, but it still is maybe a little like general. And so I took the mantra of my business, the do less, live more, breathe easier, and added that as the subtitle to the podcast, so that people who want to do less, who want to simplify, decluttering is a big part of what I do as well, that will resonate with them. I do think it has made a difference because that phrase is something that people respond viscerally to. They're like, do less, live more? Yes, sign me up. And they haven't even gotten to the breathe easier part. So that was the title. And then in terms of the imagery, I like to definitely keep up with changes in my looks. I want people to be able to identify me, to see that, and then see the rest of my branding and be like, that's her. So that's actually, I think, I want to say 2 or 3 times I've like done a minor adjustment with a photo. And then more recently, I had like a font update and an image update and just kind of cleaned it up, because you start where you're at, but it's okay to make adjustments as you go because you're growing into this.
Awesome. Thank you. Okay. 3 years. You did change the title. You tweaked it, a minor rebrand. You tweaked the artwork. You might have had changed your hair or your look or whatever, and you might have just updated it.
Yep.
I did that as well. I had on a different podcast. It was about real estate investing. I grabbed a photo when I was wearing a suit. Back then I wore suits more. I was wearing a suit and it was a bit overweight, and I took a picture. And then later on, when I both got more in shape, and secondly, I just said, I'm not a suit guy. I don't wear suits. Who am I freaking trying to kid right now? And this isn't me. It wasn't me anymore because I didn't identify with that person. The hairstyle, the weight that I was, and the suit that I was wearing, it was all wrong. Yep. It was all completely wrong. So I was like, nope, updating this for sure. So you gave us permission to do that. I like that. And in 3 years of a podcast, and in what way have you updated the guests that you have on the show and the questions you'll ask the guest?
Absolutely. And it's interesting too, because there are some things that I really truly haven't changed from the beginning. So if you are starting fresh, one of my favorite bits of advice is be a podcast listener. Know what you like, know what you appreciate, know what drives you nuts. So like, get to the topic already, or know what things you look forward to. And I created a framework in terms of what I ask my guests that has maintained to this day. I love starting the show the same way and ending it the same way with like this fun, rapid wrap up. And it's so interesting because the answers that come out of that can surprise you, can be like deeper sometimes than you would ever expect for something like that. That's remained the same. The questions that I ask the guests, because we are covering a variety of like topic pillars, if you will, simplicity, self-awareness, systems, stress, that a lot of us is. Because of that, the questions will relate specifically to the guest and the topic, but the pattern, again, the framework of the questions, I always want to start with, what are we talking about? Why do we care about this? And leave them with, okay, what do I do about it? What can I walk away taking at least one step? And it feels doable.
Can you repeat that one more time? Because it's a brilliant framework.
Yeah.
And I think that the listener ought to just take note of it real quick, how to start it and how to do it and how to wrap it up. Would you say that one more time?
Sure. So there were two parts to it. One is the overall episode where I begin with the introduction, we have the questions within, and then I have a wrap up. And it's a great way to kind of say, okay, we're going to head into this wrap up now. And it feels like a really smooth transition. So that's the big full episode. But within that, the questions, even though they may differ, answer what we're talking about, why we care about that, and what they can do, because I want there to be not only inspiration, but action taken.
Yep. So what we're talking about, why we're talking about it, and what to do with it.
Yep.
I love
exactly. And very doable what to do with it, because my whole mission is to help you reduce your overwhelm, right? To breathe easier, to do less. And way too often we are in this information accepting mode where we get completely overwhelmed, even with the best of intentions. So again, sticking with my mission, this is what I'm about, this is what I want to achieve, even if that means cutting the episode shorter than I might like it, because I want it to be digestible and doable.
Love it. So with your questions and your guests that you've had on, you've made some changes, but the framework has stayed the same. And let's explain what it is we're talking about. Let's explain why we're bringing it up in the first place. And then let's give you what are you going to do with all of this information at the end. That's all stayed the same. But the questions in between, they will change per guest. So it'll just be like, how does this organically flow? Where is it going with this person? And what follow-up question will I ask that help with that framework of what, why, and what to do, right?
Right. And the other question.
Yeah, go ahead.
That you asked was about the guest itself. And I think this is so important, again, whether you are just starting or you've been doing it for a bit, but remember that you will grow into this. And so the first people that I had on were the people that I had been a guest on their podcast, and I really appreciated what they did, or maybe I was inspired by how they ran their show or they hosted or what they did. And you don't want reciprocity on principle, okay? Not everybody is a fit, but if they fit because you were very much aligned with them, that's a great way to do it. So I reached out to them. I reached out to people that I knew that were business friends of mine that I loved what they did. And it really did resonate with what my audience would need. But that was the beginning. That's the initial pool. And then as I had really great guests on, as I met people online, and then I could refer to them just like you did with Lubna connecting with me, then I grew into that. So the guests have changed and I would say gotten stronger and stronger. And in many respects, not only because I've built a reputation of having a consistent and like a strong podcast, if you will, that's good numbers, but it's not just about the numbers. It's about the integrity of the message, and people are believing in it and want to be part of that conversation. But also too, because I'm more and more clear about the conversation, what I'm asking of people, the demands I'm making, if you will. You and I had this conversation earlier. I was so impressed with like your information that you provided, and you're like, here's how it's going to go. And you are not going to miss a thing about what I expect from you. And when we match up, it's going to be amazing. And I was like, right on. And that's what I've had to learn too.
Cool. Quick question about with those guests that you're talking about and the questions that you have in the process of what, why, and what to do with it. Your last piece, I think you said of every episode, and it sounded as if it was the same questions for everybody. I'll double check that with you. But it was called Rapid Wrap Up. Wrap Up, which is not easy to say.
It is not easy to say.
You should switch that. Rapid Wrap Up.
I'm used to saying it. I don't know what to tell you.
All right. It's like Adam Adams. Nobody could say that unless you are me. So Rapid Wrap Up. Are those the same questions for everybody? Is it a list of 3 questions? And okay, tell us about that.
It is actually. And I'm not sure, again, I'm a big podcast listener, and I was inspired by these like sort of these fun questions, the out of left field, like it's almost like a palate cleanser after you've absorbed all this information, and it leaves you on a positive note. But at the same time, you also get interesting tidbits. And so it is a song that either revs you up or lifts your spirits, because I love music and productivity, and I love music anyhow. So there's that. Then there's the idea of a mantra or a quote or something that is inspirational. That's just like little soundbite, if you will.
Do you ever, I know I'm cutting you off first briefly. I know you'll get to the third one.
Yep.
Do you ever answer these questions on your show for you?
I did actually. So for my 100th episode, I had my biz bestie interview me. So I was a guest on my own show. And so I answered these questions and it was super fun actually. So I love that you asked that. So,
so the first one is a song that it motivates you.
Yep. Lifts your spirits, makes you dance.
Second one is a quote that's inspirational. And what's the third one?
The third one is any resource whatsoever, doesn't have to relate to the topic we discussed at all, that just simply makes your life better. And I've had answers from everything from like Trello to Runkeepers to, I don't know, a timer, like you name it, like Brain FM, whatever. It's like, it's been amazing, the list of things. And so then I've started to track, especially if it's a book. I have a favorites page on my website where I have the books available. So if people hear like, ooh, that's interesting, I want that, they can go get it. And I also created Spotify playlists for the music. So now I have a podcast playlist, actually multiple volumes now of the guest song suggestions, and it's a good jam fest.
That's fun.
Yeah.
So going back to the 3 years that you've learned everything, I only know part of the answer to this because you mentioned that you had your 3rd anniversary with your podcast recently. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
And that you invested in a different microphone. And I know that the microphone you're using now is one of my favorites. I know the one that you had right before, another one of my favorites that I suggest to other people. I'm curious, what else for equipment, whether it's lighting, headphones, webcams, multiple angles of webcams, how many different microphones did you buy? One on your right when you started, another on your 1st anniversary, then the 2nd, and then the 3rd? Or kind of tell us, how did your equipment journey go from the beginning, if you don't mind?
Please. And also what I want to say, and I think this is so incredibly important, is this, like anything else, is a start where you're at, and you can do a lot with a smaller budget and with fewer items. And so again, I've grown into this, but I actually started with the ATR 2100 right away. And I had a bit of a background. I used to do voice work, and I know people who do music and music production and stuff like that. So I knew that I wanted a dynamic mic because at the time I started my podcast, I had what I jokingly called my corner office. I was literally working in an office out of a bedroom before we could build what is now my beautiful office.
Did you at least have a window in your corner office?
Thankfully, I did. It was a great window. So yeah. And so with that in mind, and with cats and kids and all the things like that, I was like, okay, so this is going to be dynamic mic time so that we can make sure it's directional and it's my voice, and we just do the best to avoid all the background distractions. So you can start anywhere. People start in closets, you name it.
Can you tell us real quick? I know what you mean, but the listener might not.
Right.
What do you mean by, quote, dynamic mic?
Right. What I said before, and I'll expand upon it. Okay. When I say directional, it means it's picking up your voice. And then if you go to the side of the mic or farther away, it's less inclined. A condenser mic is more of the 360 kind of pickup. So you just want to watch for that, because if you are in a place where you cannot control the quiet, you don't have the padded walls. Sometimes I'd like padded walls, but if
I would be much more protected, less black eyes for sure.
I'm just saying I'm a little klutzy, but it's okay. So yeah, if you don't have that, if you are like trying to create this in a sea of chaos, then yeah, the dynamic kind will serve you better for this. So that's what I was looking for. And Audio-Technica has great products, and it was a reasonable price. It was an investment, but I thought, well, if I do that, then I have to worry less about the actual environment. And I know that I can use Zoom to record, which we're doing right now. And you can technically use that for free, or, for a small expense if you want to extend how you use it. And I was using it for coaching anyhow. And then I actually picked up Audacity for free, and I love it, and I still use it to this day. So I have not changed that. And I used the same mic for 3 years. And it was really only through guesting quite a bit, and then having certain guests come on where I heard them on the mic you and I are now using. And I was like, oh my goodness, what a sound. And I was like, I want to go to there. And part of it was, again, that's on my wish list. And when it's time, I will do it. And yeah, 3 years, I did a little bit more of a rebrand of the podcast art and bought myself a new mic. And I must say, nice. I'm pretty happy.
Cool. You've mentioned that you had a pretty good process in the beginning. After 3 years, what have you changed in your process for any of the parts? Whether it's for editing, whether it's for offloading, whether it's for how to get a guest or any other part, have you changed your process in 3 years? Where did it start? Where did it develop and why?
So part of the process of editing has at the very beginning, and this kind of answers a question too, in terms of like, sometimes there are things that hold you up, right? The classic question of like, what kept you from starting the podcast? And my two things were, I was a bit afraid of the tech. I'm much less afraid of it now, but back then I was like, I don't even know what to do with this. And also there was a bit of mindset, like, what am I bringing to the table here? Who's going to want to listen? So I had to work on both of those things. And part of the tech part was delegating. I actually worked out brilliantly. A fellow entrepreneur of mine was starting her podcast production agency. At the same time, I wanted to start my podcast. And I said, let's start on the ground floor together. And we've never looked back. So
you're her first client and you've never had to edit your own.
That is correct. I mean,
cool.
do some minor editing and I give, especially for the solo episodes or the setups, I give very clean audio to them. But yeah, that's something that I've always outsourced. And at first it was scary to do that, but I'm so glad I did because it gave me the space to focus on learning the ropes in terms of the content and, like you said, the process. So it started with making sure that I had some basic automations in place. And I started at the very beginning with a Google form for people to fill out. And that, again, these are a lot of free opportunities out there to be able to automate the process. And because I was already using Acuity in my business, that was right there an opportunity to book the podcasting recording time. And so I started with that very basic. I actually grew into ClickUp in part because that was something that my podcast producer and I could use together. So, but you could do the same thing with Trello or any other project management software. Just that's the one that we happen to use. And I rather like it because we built the form right into ClickUp and then I felt ever so fancy. But yeah, just capturing that information, that's key. I still use Acuity though. And one of the things that I have really grown into is making sure that the templates of the reminders have the proper information they need. And every single reminder has the location of where we're going to record, what they need to do to prepare. You do something very similar to that, Adam. And that's something I've really grown into. Every time you have someone who's like, what? I didn't know. I'm like, okay, let me repeat myself.
Yeah. I don't love, and I might go as far as I dislike, when I'm trying to get on somebody's podcast and I don't know the link that I'm going to use or how I'm going to do this. And especially when they're like, hey, I'll email you within 72 hours. So I'm like, when in 72 hours? Like, is it going to be right when we're starting, which half of them do? Or is it going to be 3 days before, which a good amount of them do as well? And then it's like, I don't know where to look. And so with me, and I think Acuity and Calendly are similar. Is that right?
I think so.
Okay. And there's other calendar links that we can schedule with. And it can automatically generate a new Zoom link. And it can automatically import it into everybody's calendar. So they'll look on their phone, their watch, their computer, on their calendar, their Google Calendar, for example, and it'll be there. It will also have reminders. And when it doesn't have that, it does get frustrating for me. We're going to take a break, Lisa. And when we get back, we're going to end today's episode the same way I end every single episode, which changes every time. And we'll be right back. Hey, my friend, as you know, this episode is sponsored by my company, GrowYourShow.com. We want you to be able to have the best tools at your disposal without costing you a whole arm and a leg. So right now you can get a free list of vetted equipment that like mics, mixers, webcams, sound treatment, editing software, everything that you need. I created the whole PDF with direct purchase links just to save you time and money, to help it be more convenient for you. So this free PDF will help you skip all the guesswork. If it's on there, it's vetted and approved by yours truly. And if it's not on there, it's probably not worth the money. So go ahead and get yours at growyourshow.com/PDF. Let's get back into the show. We're back with Lisa Zawrotny. And I said before we went to the commercial, we're going to end this in the same way we end every single episode, which changes all the time. And today, I want to find out Lisa's number one biggest mistake she ever made in over 3 years of podcasting. In your whole journey, biggest mistake you ever made.
Oh my goodness. It feels like I'm constantly making mistakes, like every time, like missing something that would have been good to share with them, the guests or things like that. I'm going to have to go with being like, again, this is a mindset thing, but I was hesitant to do solo episodes. I actually really liked the guest episodes more. And so for me, and again, this is for my journey, what I'm trying to do, the purpose of my podcast, the fact that I'm a coach and I want to share certain and very specific messages about holistic productivity to the world, I think that stepping into the solo episode sooner would have been wiser, but I went at the pace that worked at the time.
Cool. That's really good. And I agree with you, especially as a coach, somebody who works one-on-one with clients, or even if you just have a online program where you've created content that is charged, that if you spend that time with your listener one-on-one, that's a solo episode, then they're going to get to know you more. It's that know, like, trust is going to go much, much faster. And they're more likely to schedule to talk to you. They're more likely to buy into your program or whatever it is. So we can help our listener a little bit more if we do those solos. I love it. How about the number one best advice that you would have for the listener today?
So we talk about systems and processes, things like that. And don't be afraid of those words. It means having a consistent way you do things and a way to track it that can be a checklist, that sort of thing. And then we talked about automation. And what I want to encourage you to understand is that this not only makes you better at what you do, but it can help you find better guests and get better content out of them. What you were mentioning before, Adam, about like sending the reminders and them being able to easily get where they need to go, right? That we're recording together and it's like, there's the link. I don't have to go searching for it. So they show up on time. They show up. This concept in productivity that I love to talk about is how we show up with our energy, right? And so it's not just about time management. It's about self-management and energy management. And so when we feel like we know what's going on, we know where our stuff is. You know how you're running out the door and you're like, oh my God, where are my keys? And what do I have? And you bring that stress with you. You want to do everything you can so that the guest does not bring that stress with them. They come fully present, ready to give the most with you. That's going to be the best collaborative process. And all of those things, the automation and setting up things the way that we're talking about, that's going to help you get there.
Ah, good stuff. You started to mention something to me that I'm hoping that I'm getting on the right track. So correct me if I'm wrong. Another piece of advice that I think you wanted to share, and I might be paraphrasing off the base too much, is something about in the beginning of starting the podcast, it could be good to let your guests know who your listener is, or did you not say anything like that?
I didn't, but you were apparently thinking, so I don't do hypnotism, but apparently you read minds. And
boom.
Mic drop. No, wait, don't drop the mic. It's a very precious mic. Yeah. Again, it's that communication, right? This is what I'm about. This is what we're doing. You know your listener. And then, yes, absolutely communicating that. Well, communicating to that to anyone who will potentially listen to your show, to share your show, and then, of course, to be on your show. And many times there's a big overlap.
I also wanted to go through the rapid wrap up, even if I can't say it.
Fair enough.
Will you give it to me and I'll give it to you?
Absolutely. Adam, Are you ready for this rapid wrap up?
Let's go.
Awesome. I love it. All right. So simply fill in the blanks for me. The first is a song that lifts my spirits and makes me dance is?
One Day by Modest Yahoo.
All right. We'll put that on the playlist. All right. The second question is a quote or a mantra even that really inspires me, or maybe I share a lot.
Persistence and determination. So it's a quote from Calvin Coolidge that I learned in junior high. I was in band and Mr. Brimhall made us memorize it. And it stayed with me ever since. We memorized lots of different quotes with him. Like every month, we would memorize a different one for 3 years. And there's this one by Calvin Coolidge that isn't memorized anymore, but it's like that it's like persistence and determination are like the most important, omnipotent like things that there are. And it's not how smart we are or how talented we are or how educated we are. Those things you can still be a complete fool and be educated and all of this. But the only thing that really defines a winner versus a loser, somebody who's given up and quit and never achieved what they wanted, is persistence and determination. So I remember clearly that I learned a new instrument with him. And I remember thinking every day, like persistence and determination. And I sucked at my first instrument and I was terrible at the second one for a while. And it kept just going and going and going. And eventually I became really, really good. And like first chair in all state and full ride scholarship and all of this stuff. And it really came from that. And anything that I've had been successful, whether it's bodybuilding or six-pack abs or achieving a certain amount of income in a month, whatever, it is all about persistence and determination. I really, really feel like he was on point when he decided to write that.
I love that. And that reminds me of the phrase, I don't even know where it came from, but persistence trumps talent, right? Because that's habit development right there, 101. It's like, keep going, keep taking the steps, and that skill acquisition will be there. And by the way, do you see how even a lighthearted question like that can be so deep?
Yeah.
Look at that response.
Yeah.
That was amazing, right? All right. Third question for you. Last, but definitely not least. Actually, I have a bonus one after that I didn't even tell you about, but...
Oh boy, I'm scared. I didn't write this one down. What am I going to do?
Don't you worry about that.
All right.
But the third one is simply a resource. It could be a book, an app, anything, not even related to the conversation, but just something that you're like, this makes my life better.
I'll just go back to Calendly because it stays on my mind a lot. Having an online calendar has saved so much time for me trying to get those systems in place and the online calendar and updating the calendar and really understanding what the calendar can do, like using at its full potential. Because like I said a couple of times, there's so much that it can do and so much time that it can take off of you. It solves a lot of problems. And I'm really grateful that I learned about it a few years ago because it's changed me.
Yeah, I agree. The bonus one is, what are you grateful for today, Adam?
I'm grateful for something different every day. I used to practice gratitude much better than I do. I'd wake up and before I would get out of bed, I would practice gratitude. I would make sure before I went to sleep that I would practice gratitude. It's kind of like prayer for people who that's what they do. Because generally speaking, when you pray, you're really saying thank you. And maybe you're asking for things or manifesting things. And so it's very similar. I would do that religiously and anytime that I was stressed. And I would try to think about all the things that I'm thankful for. Today, it's the weather. Today, it's the beautiful day. It's a gentle breeze. It's beautiful out there. I'm excited to spend as much time outside as possible because there's so much health benefits for being out there. And when we sit and kind of meditate or pray or express that gratitude out there as well, I think it really it turns us into better people for the next few hours at least. And the more we can practice that, the more it can stay a part of us.
It does. It's a big part of what I coach, and it's healing and transformative. And the way I look at gratitude is like, especially when you're drained, like the embers of a fire. And if you stoke them and you give them oxygen, if you feed them in a really beautiful way, you build that fire back up. And gratitude practice is a way to do that.
Love it. So how about this? What is a song, Lisa, that gets you moving?
Uptown Funk, hands down.
It'll funk you up.
It'll funk you up.
How about a quote, a motivational quote?
Okay, I hope I have it in the right order. So we'll either call it a quote or a paraphrase, but it's by Sophia Bush, and it's, "You are allowed to be a work in progress and a masterpiece simultaneously."
Pretty deep.
I love that because it encourages us to keep striving for better, but also to have gratitude for where we are and what we're doing, and appreciation and celebrating and savoring our lives and our achievements in the moment as well.
That's great. How about a tool? And I'm not going to let you pick any calendar things.
No,
I already did that.
But a book is on there, so I'd like to pick a book today.
Oh, wait. A song.
So is a song,
I wrote a
mantra,
song, a quote,
and then a resource.
and a
It could be a
tool.
book or app or tool.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay. Got it. All right.
So
Keep going.
if you're
I
cool with
interrupted
that-
you and I shouldn't have. Keep going.
No problem. The book that I'm picking today, and it's hard because I actually have a bunch of favorites and transformative ones, but I'm going with Greg McKeown's Essentialism. The philosophy of less but better is chef's kiss. That's what we need to be about. There's just too much information, just too much out there that doesn't belong in our space. And what's essential, his philosophy on this is just, if you haven't, even if you can't read it, go read a blog post about it or listen to a podcast where he's on and get the gist of it, because it will fill you up.
Stuff. Essentialism. I've definitely heard of it. I can't recall if I've read it or not, but there's a couple books behind you about habits and other things that I'm looking at that I've read and really like and enjoy. Thank you for jumping on the podcast, talking about what you do, who you serve, how your podcast helps you serve them, what you've learned in 3 years, talking about the changing of the title, the artwork, the questions that you ask, how you do that, your formula or your format, getting guests, starting with some of the people that you already knew, and slowly growing where you ask for referrals and continue to grow your own network. Talking about the equipment, staying with that same mic for a long time, talking about the difference between a dynamic and a condenser mic, and that we can do this on a budget. We can start this at whatever budget that we have right into the beginning, and talking about some of the other things that you utilize and use for your process, like the rapid wrap up. These are things that I think our listener can take and implement in their podcast to get more engagement and have more fun with it, to keep going with it, and to hone in, like you said, with your guests as you continue to think about and focus on what you're really trying to achieve and who you're trying to achieve it with. I don't remember if it was recorded specifically during the podcast or in the pre-interview, but I remember you talking about how important that is. To know who you're serving as one of the most essential first things is to understand, what are you trying to achieve with your podcast, and who is my avatar? Who is that person that I can support and help? And I think all of that is really, really good advice for us as we're trying to have a successful podcast, to have those things in mind. If you're listening, and you are, Lisa's information is down in the bottom of the show notes. All you got to do is scroll down and you can go to her website, her podcast, or any social media that she wanted to share. You can follow her and connect with her there. Lisa, thank you for being part of the podcast.
Adam, thank you so much. I appreciate you too. And another shout out to Lubna for connecting us. It's talk about gratitude. I'm grateful for this conversation today.
Awesome. And I'll see you guys on the next episode. The next episode is a solo. Lisa also mentioned you should do solos and interviews, and every other episode for me is a solo episode. So I've got one that's queued up where the content of it is directly for you. So instead of going anywhere, I will meet you in just a moment. If you're glad that you checked out the podcast today, if you got some value out of this episode, some actionable takeaways, I invite you to do one of three things. A, you could do a written review on Apple. Let us know what you think. Just an honest written review. B, you could share the podcast with a friend of yours who needs it. Or C, at the very least, implement what you've learned to take your business and your podcast to the next level. And I'll see you on the next episode.